It was a cold winter afternoon in the city. The sky was covered in thick gray clouds and the wind howled through the narrow streets. As the busy city continued to hustle, a quiet man named Alex found himself walking down a busy avenue. He was a simple man with a simple life. He wasn't famous and he never sought attention. But as he walked down the street, something felt off. It was one of those days when everything seemed normal, yet there was a sense of unease hanging in the air, like a storm was brewing somewhere in the distance. Alex had been through many tough times in his life. He knew what it meant to struggle, to feel lost in a world full of noise and chaos. He worked long hours at a small cafe, making just enough to get by. But today, as he walked home after his shift, there was something different in the air, something he couldn't quite put his finger on, but something that made him feel like he was being watched. As he turned a corner, Alex saw a man standing across the street. He was tall, with dark sunglasses and a long coat. His face was calm, almost unreadable, but there was an intensity in his gaze that seemed to pierce through the bustling crowd. It was Keanu Reeves. Alex had always admired Keanu. Everyone did. There was something about him, his calm presence, his kindness, the kind of person you'd want to have by your side in a crisis. And in that moment, Alex couldn't help but wonder why Keanu was standing on that street corner, just like him, seemingly lost in thought. But there was something else, something about the way he was standing there, almost waiting. As Alex tried to shake off the strange feeling, he continued walking, trying to get to his small apartment just a few blocks away. But the moment he crossed the street, the situation quickly changed. From nowhere, a group of men appeared. They were rough-looking, with angry expressions, and they surrounded Alex in an instant. Alex froze. His heart raced. He was no stranger to danger. The streets weren't kind, but this was different. This wasn't just some random encounter. These men weren't here by accident. The leader of the group stepped forward, a cruel smile spreading across his face. "Hey there, pal. You look like you've got something worth taking," he said, his voice low and threatening. Alex could feel the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Before Alex could even react, one of the men shoved him against a nearby wall. Panic surged through him. He tried to fight back, but the others were too strong, too quick. His hands trembled as he struggled, the sharp edge of fear cutting through his thoughts. This was it. He had no way out. Then, just as quickly as the men had surrounded him, there was a sudden shift. The tension in the air seemed to break. Alex's mind couldn't process it. His focus was solely on the group of men and the danger that was closing in on him. And then, just like a shadow, Keanu Reeves appeared. Without a word, Keanu moved through the crowd, his steps measured but purposeful. The men didn't even notice him at first, but Alex did. He saw the way Keanu carried himself, calm, unshaken, like nothing in the world could rattle him. He was like a force of nature, quietly and confidently stepping into a storm. The leader of the group sneered at him. "What do you want, old man?" he asked, his tone mocking. Keanu didn't flinch. He simply looked the man in the eyes, his expression unreadable. The seconds stretched into what felt like an eternity. And then something happened that would change everything. Without saying a word, Keanu reached into his coat, pulling out a small but sleek device. The men didn't know what it was at first. Was it a weapon? Were they in more danger than they thought? The leader's eyes widened as he took a step back, his bravado faltering. Keanu held up the device and the group instantly stopped. Their movements slowed, and the atmosphere shifted. Something in the air changed. It was like Keanu had turned the tables, flipping the situation in an instant. "Walk away," Keanu said calmly, his voice almost too quiet to hear over the noise of the street. But somehow his words carried more weight than anything else in that moment. The leader of the group, taken aback by the sudden shift, hesitated. His hand hovered near his jacket pocket, where he kept his weapon. For a moment it seemed like the situation might escalate once again. But then, with a quick motion, Keanu moved closer, and the men began to back off, slowly, reluctantly. One by one, they turned and left, disappearing into the crowd. Alex stood there, stunned. He couldn't believe what had just happened. His heart was still racing, but it was no longer with fear. It was with gratitude, with awe. Keanu had saved him, but it wasn't just about the physical threat. It was the way he had stepped into the situation, completely calm, without hesitation, without fear. As the men disappeared into the distance, Keanu turned to Alex, his expression softening. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice gentle but firm. Alex could barely find his voice. I, I don't know. How did you—" Keanu smiled, a small, almost knowing smile. "Sometimes the right moment finds you," he said, "and when it does, you act." Alex nodded, still trying to comprehend everything that had just happened. But before he could say anything else, Keanu turned and began walking away. Just like that, like nothing had happened at all. But for Alex, everything had changed. The next few days felt surreal to Alex. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the moment when Keanu Reeves had stepped in to save him. He had been in danger, trapped in a situation he could never have anticipated. And then, out of nowhere, the famous actor had appeared. The calmness of Keanu's actions, the way he had disarmed the whole group without lifting a finger, it was like something out of a movie. But this wasn't a movie. This was real life. And Alex couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning of something much bigger than him. As he tried to return to normal, life didn't quite feel the same. He went back to his shifts at the cafe, serving customers with his usual polite smile. But there was always a lingering thought in the back of his mind. What had Keanu meant when he said, "Sometimes the right moment finds you"? Alex couldn't help but wonder if he had been part of something larger than just a random encounter. Maybe Keanu had been there for a reason. Maybe he had been waiting for Alex. That evening, as Alex was finishing up his shift, a man walked into the cafe. Alex didn't think much of it at first, but then he noticed the man was staring at him with an intensity that was hard to ignore. The man was in his early 40s, with a sharp suit and an air of confidence. He didn't look like the usual customers Alex served. The man approached the counter, his eyes locked on Alex. "Excuse me," the man said. "Are you the one who was saved by Keanu Reeves a few days ago?" Alex's heart skipped a beat. He had no idea how this stranger knew about that moment. He hadn't told anyone. How could he have? It had felt like a dream, and talking about it seemed like it might make it less real. "Uh, yes," Alex replied, his voice shaking slightly. "That was me." The man smiled, but it wasn't a comforting smile. It was more like a knowing smile, one that made Alex feel like he was being observed from all angles. "You don't realize it yet," the man said, "but your life is about to change in ways you can't even imagine." Alex took a step back, unsure of how to respond. Who was this guy? What did he mean? And why was he speaking as if he already knew Alex's future? The man leaned in slightly, lowering his voice to a whisper. "Keanu saved you for a reason, Alex. You're not just some random guy. You're connected to something bigger, something that's going to unfold very soon. You'll see." Alex's mind raced. What was going on? He couldn't make sense of it. This was a stranger, someone he had never met before. And yet he spoke as though he had been watching him for a long time. Before Alex could say anything else, the man stood up and walked toward the door. But just as he reached for the handle, he turned back, locking eyes with Alex. "You'll understand soon enough. The pieces are starting to fall into place." With that, he was gone. Alex stood there frozen. He could still hear the man's words echoing in his mind. "You're connected to something bigger." What did that mean? Was this some kind of conspiracy? Or was it just a coincidence? That night, as Alex walked home, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life was teetering on the edge of something monumental. He had been saved by Keanu Reeves, and now this stranger had come into his life, saying things that didn't make any sense. The more Alex thought about it, the more he felt like the world was changing around him, and he had no idea how he fit into it. As he turned the corner near his apartment, Alex froze. There, standing at the edge of the street, was Keanu Reeves. His heart skipped a beat. This couldn't be real. Had he been followed? Was this just some kind of strange coincidence? Or was there something more going on? Keanu saw him standing there and smiled. This time it wasn't the calm, collected Keanu that Alex had seen before. It was different. There was something more personal about it, as if Keanu knew exactly what Alex was going through. "Hey, Alex," Keanu said, his voice warm. "We need to talk." Alex's mouth went dry. We need to talk? What was happening? Why was Keanu here, standing in front of his apartment, asking to talk? Alex nodded slowly, still trying to process everything that had happened over the last few days. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Keanu motioned for Alex to follow him, leading him toward a small park nearby. As they sat on a bench, Keanu took a deep breath, as if gathering his thoughts. "Alex, I've been watching you for a long time," Keanu began. "I know it sounds strange, but there's something you need to understand. The danger you faced the other day wasn't just about you. You were in the right place at the right time, and that's not a coincidence." Alex stared at him, his mind racing. "What are you saying? Why me? I'm just a guy." "No, Alex," Keanu interrupted gently. "You're not just any guy. You've been chosen for something far bigger than you can imagine. You've got a role to play in a story that's just beginning." Alex was speechless. This was too much. First the stranger in the cafe. Now Keanu himself was saying these impossible things. Keanu continued, his voice growing more serious. "The world is changing, Alex. Things are happening that we can't control. But there are people like you and me who can make a difference. The choice is yours. You can walk away, forget everything that's happened, or you can step into the unknown and help us make sure the right things are done." Alex felt the weight of his words. What was Keanu talking about? What role could he possibly have in something this big? Before he could ask another question, Keanu stood up, his face hardening with resolve. "We don't have much time. Something's coming, and when it does, it'll be too late. The choice is yours, Alex. You'll know when the time comes." And just like that, Keanu turned and walked away, leaving Alex alone on the bench, his mind spinning with confusion, fear, and curiosity. The next few days passed in a blur for Alex. His life, which had once been so simple and predictable, now felt like it was unraveling at the edges. The moment Keanu had left him on that park bench, Alex felt as though he had stepped into a new world, one that was full of danger, secrets, and things he couldn't possibly understand. His thoughts kept returning to the conversation he had with Keanu. "You've been chosen for something bigger." The words echoed in his mind, each time feeling heavier than the last. Alex didn't know what to make of it. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't someone special. He was just a guy who worked long hours at a cafe and tried to make ends meet. Yet here he was, being told that he was part of something much larger than himself. That evening, after another long shift, Alex walked home slowly, trying to process everything that had happened. His footsteps echoed through the empty streets, and the cold wind seemed to bite at his skin. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching him. The unease that had settled into his chest ever since the encounter with Keanu was growing stronger. As he turned the corner near his apartment, Alex froze. There, standing in the shadow of a nearby building, was the same man from the cafe, the one who had spoken to him with such cryptic words. He hadn't seen the man in days, and yet here he was, watching Alex intently, as though waiting for him to approach. "Alex," the man said, his voice low and steady, "you're starting to understand, aren't you?" Alex didn't know how to respond. He was still reeling from everything that had happened. "Understand what?" he wanted to ask, but the words wouldn't come. The man took a step forward, his eyes never leaving Alex's face. "You're not alone in this. There are others who know what's coming, and they'll do anything to stop us." Alex's heart skipped a beat. The words felt like a warning, a shadow creeping up behind him, but he didn't know who or what he was being warned about. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. The man's expression darkened. "There are forces at play, Alex. Forces that have been in motion for a long time. They've been manipulating things behind the scenes, pulling the strings, making sure the right people never get in the way of their plans. And now they've noticed you. You're a threat to them." Alex could feel his pulse quicken. His mind raced as he tried to process what was happening. "What do you want me to do? I'm not a fighter. I don't know anything about this." The man gave him a piercing look. "That's exactly why you're the key. You don't know, Alex. That's what makes you unpredictable. You're not bound by the rules they've set. You have something they don't expect, and it's time for you to embrace it." Alex felt a shiver run down his spine. He didn't understand any of this. How could he be a part of something so big, so dangerous? He was just an ordinary guy, living an ordinary life. But the man wasn't finished. Keanu Reeves isn't just an actor, Alex. He's been involved in this for years. He's part of a group of people who fight against those who want to control everything. And now he's trying to recruit you? Alex's breath caught in his throat. Keanu, fighting against forces? This was madness. But even as the words seemed impossible, something deep inside him told him it was true. The man stepped closer, his face now only a few inches from Alex's. You have a choice. You can stay out of it, live your life like nothing has changed, or you can help us, help Keanu, and fight back against the ones who would destroy everything. Alex didn't know what to say. He felt like he was drowning in a sea of confusion. How could he be a part of something so much bigger than him? He was just a regular guy. And yet here he was, standing face to face with a man who was speaking as if Alex's actions could change the course of something much larger. Think about it, the man said, his tone softening for the first time. You're already part of this, whether you like it or not. You just don't realize how important you are yet. The man stepped back, his figure slowly disappearing into the shadows. We'll be in touch, Alex. But remember this. They're watching, and the moment you choose a side, there's no going back. Alex stood there, frozen in place as the man disappeared into the night. His heart raced in his chest and his mind was a whirlwind of questions. Who was the man? What was Keanu really involved in? And who were they? He couldn't stop thinking about it. Every conversation, every strange encounter, every moment in the last few days seemed to be leading him toward something. Something he wasn't sure he was ready for. But somehow, deep down, he knew he couldn't ignore it. The next morning, as Alex walked into work at the cafe, he was different. He was hyper-aware of everything around him, the people coming and going, the way the barista smiled at him as she handed him his coffee, the hum of conversations filling the air. It all seemed so ordinary, yet nothing about it felt ordinary anymore. Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen, something that would change his life forever. And that afternoon, it did. Alex couldn't shake the sense that the world around him had changed overnight. Everything felt different now. Every street corner, every face in the crowd, even the air felt heavier. He was haunted by the words of the stranger in the alley and Keanu's cryptic message. And yet, despite the growing unease, Alex couldn't seem to turn away. Something was pulling him forward, a force stronger than any fear or doubt. That afternoon, after an excruciatingly long shift, Alex returned home to find an envelope slipped under his door. It was simple, unmarked, and yet the moment Alex saw it, he knew it was important. He hesitated for a moment, his fingers trembling as he picked it up. There was no return address, no sign of who had left it. But as soon as he opened it, everything changed. Inside was a single piece of paper with a short message written in bold, clear letters. You're being watched. Meet me at the old bookstore at midnight. They know where you are. Don't trust anyone. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. Who was this from? Who were they? And why did it feel like time was running out? The bookstore was in a part of town Alex had never visited before. An old, nearly forgotten area filled with dilapidated buildings and streets that felt like they hadn't been touched in decades. He had heard rumors about the place, how it was once a hub of activity, but now it stood as a shadow of its former self. Quiet, almost abandoned. At midnight, Alex stood at the entrance of the bookstore, his heart pounding in his chest. The doors were old, wooden, and creaked as he pushed them open. The smell of old paper and dust filled the air as he stepped inside. The dim lighting cast long shadows across the rows of shelves. He felt as though he was walking into a memory, a place that had been frozen in time. But he wasn't alone. In the back corner of the store, hidden behind stacks of books, was the man, the one who had warned him on the street. Alex's breath caught in his throat. He had known he would find him here, but he didn't know what to expect. You came, the man said, his voice steady but with an edge of urgency. I wasn't sure you would. I guess I underestimated you. Alex couldn't help but feel a strange mixture of fear and relief. He had to know more. What's going on? Who are you? And what does this have to do with me? The man stepped forward, his eyes searching Alex's face as if weighing his every thought. You've been chosen for a reason, Alex. There are forces, powerful ones that want to control everything. They've infiltrated every part of society, every system, and they know you're the key to stopping them. Alex's mind was spinning. The pieces weren't coming together. He wanted to scream, to demand answers, but all he could do was listen as the man continued. They've been watching you for a long time. Ever since Keanu stepped into your life, you've been a target. They want to use you, or worse, eliminate you before you can figure out what's happening. Alex's heart raced as the words sank in. Keanu had warned him too. But what did it all mean? Why was he involved in something so dangerous? The man looked at him with intensity. Keanu isn't just an actor. He's been part of a group of individuals who have been fighting against these forces for years. They've been fighting in the shadows, protecting those who can make a difference. Like you. Alex swallowed hard. What do you want me to do? I don't even know who these people are. I'm just a guy who works in a cafe. This is too much. The man shook his head. That's exactly what makes you dangerous to them, Alex. You don't know how valuable you are yet. You have something they never expected. You're connected to something bigger, something that goes back generations. And you're just starting to realize the power you hold. Alex took a step back, trying to process the weight of what the man was saying. It all sounded insane. He was caught in the middle of something he didn't understand, a battle between forces he couldn't see or even name. How could he be part of any of this? He wasn't a hero. He wasn't special. He was just a guy. But then, the man said something that stopped Alex cold. You're not just any guy. You're the key to everything. The fate of the world is about to shift, Alex. And you are the one who can decide how it unfolds. The words hung in the air, and for the first time, Alex felt as though his life had a purpose. He wasn't just a bystander anymore. He was part of something much bigger than himself. But the responsibility felt overwhelming. Before Alex could respond, the man turned toward the back of the store. We have to go now. They're already here. Alex's heart skipped a beat. Who were they? Who was coming for him? The man led him through the dark aisles of the bookstore, his steps swift and sure. They reached a back door, and as soon as the man opened it, they stepped out into a narrow alley. Alex barely had time to register what was happening before the sound of footsteps echoed behind them. They found us, the man whispered. Get ready. Just then, a black car pulled up to the alley, its headlights glaring in the darkness. The door swung open, and Alex's blood ran cold when he saw who stepped out. It was Keanu Reeves. Alex's heart pounded in his chest. He had been warned about these forces, but he never expected it to escalate so quickly. Keanu had been right. This was only the beginning. Keanu looked at Alex with a serious expression. You're in danger, Alex, but you're not alone. The man beside Alex stepped forward, his tone low and urgent. We have to move now. They're after him. Before Alex could ask any more questions, Keanu grabbed his arm, pulling him into the car. The door slammed shut behind them, and the car sped off into the night, leaving the bookstore and the alley behind. Alex had no idea where they were going. He had no idea who was after him or what they wanted. But one thing was certain. His life was no longer his own. He had been pulled into a world of secrets and danger, and the stakes were higher than he could ever have imagined. The car sped through the dark streets, the city lights blurring by as Alex sat in the back seat, his mind racing with questions. Keanu sat beside him, his expression hard and unreadable, while the man from the bookstore, now identified as one of Keanu's allies, sat in the front seat, eyes darting around the rearview mirror. We're being followed, the man said, his voice tense. They know we're on the move. Alex's heart skipped a beat. Who are they, exactly? He wanted to ask, but he could hardly gather his thoughts, let alone speak. His world had become unrecognizable, and it felt like every moment brought him closer to something he wasn't sure he was ready for. Keanu turned to him, his gaze intense. I know this is a lot, Alex, but I need you to understand. What you're part of is bigger than anything you can imagine. The forces at play, the ones who've been pulling the strings in the shadows for decades, they're going to stop at nothing to control you, to control us all. Alex's voice trembled as he spoke. I don't understand any of this. What do you mean, control me? I'm just a guy. I don't have anything special to offer. Why me? Keanu's expression softened just slightly, though the urgency in his voice remained. That's exactly why you're the key, Alex. You've been living your life unaware of what's been happening around you, but now you're in the center of it. You've been chosen for a reason. You have abilities, a potential that we didn't even realize until recently. They fear what you can do. The car jerked slightly as it swerved into an alley, narrowly avoiding a large black SUV that had been tailing them. Alex's heart raced, but Keanu didn't seem fazed. You're stronger than you think, and that strength can change everything. Alex wanted to argue, to say that he didn't feel strong at all. He felt powerless, confused, and more than a little afraid. But before he could, the man in the front seat slammed his fist against the dashboard. We're being boxed in. They've got us surrounded. Alex's blood ran cold. This wasn't just some random encounter. It wasn't some coincidence that Keanu was involved. Something far darker was unfolding around him, and he was right in the middle of it. Keanu looked out the window, his expression hardening. Get ready. The car slowed, and as it turned another corner, Alex saw them. Figures in black suits, their faces covered with dark masks, appeared at the end of the alley. There were at least 5 of them, all armed with weapons that gleamed in the low light. Keanu turned to Alex, his voice low and steady. No matter what happens, you need to stay calm. Trust me, we've got this, but you've got to be ready to make a choice. The men stepped forward, their movements precise, their eyes trained on the car. Alex could feel the tension in the air, thick and oppressive. He had never been in a situation like this, and the weight of the decision in front of him was suffocating. Keanu pushed open the door, stepping out of the car with a fluid motion. The men immediately raised their weapons, but Keanu moved faster than Alex could track. Within seconds, 2 of the men were on the ground, disarmed and incapacitated. But there were still more, at least 3 remaining, and they were closing in. Alex hesitated. He didn't know what to do, how to help. He wasn't trained for this. He wasn't a fighter. But then, in that moment, something inside him clicked. He remembered the conversation with the man in the bookstore, the words about being a key, about having something special that the enemy didn't expect. It was as if a switch flipped in Alex's mind. He felt his body surge with energy he didn't know he had. In an instant, he was out of the car, moving toward Keanu. One of the attackers lunged at Keanu, but Alex was faster. He grabbed the man's wrist, twisting it until the weapon slipped from his hand. Another attacker tried to grab Alex from behind, but Alex spun, using the momentum to throw him to the ground. Keanu glanced over at Alex, his eyes wide with surprise. I knew you had it in you. Alex didn't have time to respond. The remaining attackers closed in, but Keanu was already in motion again, taking them down one by one with ease. He was unstoppable, almost like a force of nature. But Alex realized that he was beginning to move with a similar fluidity. He wasn't just following Keanu. He was part of the fight now. With the last of the attackers knocked out, the alley fell silent. Keanu turned to Alex, his expression a mixture of pride and seriousness. You did well, Keanu said, breathing heavily. You're ready now. Alex stood there, his chest rising and falling as he tried to make sense of what had just happened. He wasn't sure how he had done it, but he had. In that moment, he had stepped into a role he never thought he could fill. Ready for what? Alex asked, still trying to piece everything together. Keanu's eyes locked onto his. To fight, to stop them from taking control of everything, and most importantly, to protect the people you care about. The car door opened again, and the man from earlier stepped out, his expression now softer, though the urgency hadn't left his eyes. We don't have much time, the man said. They'll send more. We have to move quickly. Keanu looked at Alex, his expression solemn. This is where the real battle begins. The world is changing, Alex, and you're going to help us change it. For the first time since this whole ordeal had begun, Alex understood what Keanu had meant. He wasn't just an ordinary guy anymore. He wasn't just someone living in the shadows of life. He had been thrust into something far bigger, something that could change everything. And as the car drove off into the night, Alex made a decision. He wasn't going to run from this fight. He wasn't going to let fear dictate his future. He was going to embrace whatever lay ahead, no matter how uncertain or dangerous it seemed. Because he knew one thing for sure. The stakes were too high now, and this time, He wasn't just going to sit on the sidelines.